It is the fracture of her first rib.
Because it looks like these otters are fixing to have relations right
still
next
have
to
the
that
power
dam.
to soothe
And how
myself,
often
but the irrepressible power of
You wake up alive. You wake up alive. You wake up alive. So long, feel my wings sometimes.
500 words or less. Tell a complete story. Sometimes have a twist ending. The rules of flash fiction are simple but challenging, and have drawn a group of writers to the Little Falls Public Library each week to share their work. They add one additional rule. The word of the week must be used someplace in the story. Flashcast is a showcase of their work, and each episode will feature stories inspired from the word of the week. The content that arises is astounding, the talent superb, and the creativity infectious. These stories are streaks of lightning, charged, compressed, and certain to entertain. Welcome to Flashcast.
Laurel Doves, 1244. Genevieve's restless mind settled on her youngest traveling companions. Both girls had been waiting under the sacred laurel tree on that tragic day. The sprite-like Lisette and the very, very quiet Giselle had each been trained in the way, and were also under Père Jean's protection. Despite their unusual ways, she had grown to love and trust them. Lisette, who spoke with spirits, and Giselle, who spoke with horses, became her fast and true friends on their 2-month journey away from Montségur to their new home at Le Couvent of Sainte-Maximine-la-Sainte-Baume. Now that she had met Virginie and discovered the owner of the 6th sacred laurel leaf, Geneviève believed the circle of their sisterhood to be complete. They were anonymous now. They had each other, and they were safe. Letting her musings deepen into memory, Geneviève was once again atop Montségur, and dawn had not yet broken on March 16th. Grandmère was fretting, and her grandmère did not fret. Combing the tangles from Geneviève's waist-length hair, she grumbled under her breath. C'est impossible. We are beyond the reach of la Malvoisine. Montfort's trebuchet, nicknamed the Bad Neighbor, and his brutal summertime attack 34 years ago on Minerve, the city of her birth, still brought nightmare visions to Grandmère's sleep. She had been away that terrible summer, visiting family with her infant daughter, Geneviève's mother. Upon her return, she had dared to climb down into the deep gorge to mourn at the grave of more than 150 beautiful Cathar souls. The horror of their charred and scattered remains, brutally trampled into the riverside mud, nightly haunted her dreams. We have the protection of the nobles. We are safe from the Pope's fires. The soldiers cannot reach us here, not in Montségur, our safe mountain. Each exclamation was punctuated by another rake of the wooden comb, the friction causing sparks to snap and crackle along its length. My braids will last an eternity, she was tempted to tease, but the sorrow in Grandmère's sighs kept her silent. The tension building within Montségur's walls, the last of the Cathar strongholds, had reached a breaking point in recent days. As difficult as the 10 siege months had been, that morning's air of utter despair was far, far worse. Their perfecti had stopped smiling and humming. No matter the chill or hunger, the teachers had always warmed the air with gentle smiles and filled the ears, if not the bellies, of the few Cathar children sheltered among them with song. Geneviève was both freezing and starving that morning. Finally finished with the second braid, Grandmère gave one last sharp tug. Such a lovely chestnut is your hair, granddaughter, not faded red like mine. It is a blessing, to be sure. The only girl within the stronghold walls, lacking the signature auburn or blonde hair of so many Cathar women, Geneviève rued the plainness of her brown tresses. Thus Grandmère's odd compliment, although precious to her tall and solemn granddaughter, was tainted with foreboding.
Hot friction. Young Edom awakens in the dark, damp cave before the sun rises. He is feeling things he's never felt before, his body changing, developing signs of manhood. But he is not a man yet. He's done nothing to prove his worthiness. He takes his spear, frustrated, determined to slay a ceremonious beast. As the sun slowly rises, casting long shadows on the ground, Edom notices a new dwelling roughly constructed of fallen trees and animal hides. This structure wasn't here before he bedded down last nightfall. He stays in the shadows, observing the new family struggling to build their home. A man would offer assistance. Edom leaves the safety of the shadows. The newcomers are surprised and grateful for the helping hands of this young stranger. His eye connects with a beautiful girl who's settling the inside of the makeshift home. Again, Edom feels strange things happening in his body. His loincloth tightens and his face burns. He clumsily pulls a large pelt over a tree, attempting to fasten it, aware of her penetrating gaze. The elder of the family slaps Edom on the back in appreciation of his helpfulness. Startled, he's brought back to reality. His reddened cheeks fade. Hours later, within a cave, he searches to slay a sleeping beast, perhaps an easier target. Quietly slinking through the cave, Edom is surprised to see the beautiful girl on a high ledge. She's equally startled and obviously distraught. Edom acknowledges her, and Inu explains she was exploring, climbed up but cannot get down. He offers to help. With his hands on her waist, she slides down against his body as he lowers her to solid ground. Again, he feels the stirrings. But he is not considered a man yet. He needs to prove himself before he can claim a woman for his own. They both feel the friction of these new feelings. Their faces burn with puzzlement. He leads Inu out of the cave to daylight. Each day, Edom attempts to hunt the beast, to the disappointment of himself and the elders. Embarrassed, angry, he lashes out, smashing a large rock repeatedly against another. Not realizing he's being watched, he smashes. The rock feels hot. He feels hot. Irate at himself and the elders who mock him, he keeps smashing, his hands cut and stinging. Angrily, he slams the rocks harder. Sparks fly. He jumps back, surprised, as sparks fly into the dry grass. Yellow-orange tails crackle and dance, roaming freely. Edom feels heat from the tails. Inu watches wide-eyed, frightened, then runs to get the others. The elders come to view this phenomenon Edom created. They proudly dance with the bright light, feeling its warmth. They treat Edom like a god when he recreates the fire with friction of rock against rock. Edom earns the title man, and Inu is offered to him. He is now expected to take his own cave. There he also learns to create the friction of man and woman, and his strange stirrings are no longer strange.
Reducing friction through fiction. The friction of his hand sweeping crumbs from the counter whispered a rebuke. Wishing he could as easily brush the episode from his thoughts, he sloshed some coffee into his mug, grabbed the toast, and headed for the terrace. Maybe he could write her out of his head. Focusing on a point in the distance, he inhaled the salty sea spray, held it for a moment before expelling it, as though by forcing air from his lungs he could cleanse himself of this boss, this nemesis. It wasn't that she was a woman. He'd worked for women before without problem. Had she been a man, it would have made no difference. They were like two sticks rubbing together, their friction combusting, causing a firestorm, destroying everything and everyone within proximity. Today, he had slammed out of her office, oblivious of the horrified stares of his colleagues. Nervous silence followed him from his desk, where he snatched his folio and coat, to the exit door. What did he care? These peons didn't know anything. If they wanted to put up with her ridiculous demands, that was their choice. He was done trying to please her. Jump! How high? I said green. It is green. Not the right green. Not good enough. Okay, he wasn't proud of his behavior. She was like the surf, he wrote, slapping the shore. No, delete that. Like waves crashing on the rocks, the force of her personality inundated him, bashed him, battered his psyche against her determination. Not bad. Tapping at his laptop, he watched the magic of letters appearing across the screen. The very act of typing relaxed him. The thought processes of forming words and sentences took him to a different level of consciousness. The more intently he considered her, and the more devoutly he broke her down into emotions, sounds, metaphors, consonants, the calmer he became. An hour ago, he was on the verge of tendering his resignation, without a clue what his next job might be. The steady roar of the water below, the fortifying cup of caffeine, the seagulls' lonesome songs, these things helped, sure. But the new oblivion, not the obfuscation caused by anger, but the blanketing caused by peace. This came from words on the page, a place where he felt safe, where he had sought solitude and refuge before. This woman, this boss, became a character in a story. The story had a plot, as well as a moral. Rereading his words, he learned something, because the best writing teaches, even if it only teaches us humility. Maybe he wouldn't quit after all, if he still had a job. Bruised and nearly lifeless, he washed up onto the sand, but like a broken wine bottle, he was no longer just jagged pieces. The friction of sand and water had polished the rough edges, created a satin finish. Now here he was, a handful of weathered gems deposited at the cliff base, not destroyed, just changed, maybe better.